Listen to me. There is a reason why so many churches today are powerless. There is a reason why many who claim the name of Christ live in constant defeat. There is a reason why men and women sit in pews every Sunday hearing sermons, singing songs, yet their lives remain unchanged. It is because they do not pray. I am not talking about saying grace before a meal. I am not talking about repeating empty words before bed. I am talking about real, desperate, soul-shaking prayer, the kind of prayer that heaven hears and hell fears. And I tell you today, if you do not pray, you do not know God. You may know about Him, you may know doctrine, you may even be involved in ministry, but if prayer is not the cry of your heart, then your religion is dead. Because the man who knows God will pray, and the man who does not pray has no power, no intimacy with Christ, and no real life in Him. So I ask you, will you listen, not just with your ears, but with your soul? Will you let this truth confront you, shake you, awaken you? Because today the door of God's presence stands before you, and the key is in your hands. Prayer is not a ritual, it is a lifeline. It is not a religious duty to check off a list. It is the breath of the soul. A man can survive without food for weeks, without water for days, but he cannot survive a moment without air. And just as the body dies without breath, so the soul dies without prayer. Yet so many in the church today live as if prayer is optional, as if it is some religious exercise meant only for the pastors and missionaries, something reserved for special occasions or moments of desperation. They live their lives relying on their own strength, making decisions without seeking God, walking through their days without bending their knees. And then they wonder why they feel so far from Him. They wonder why their faith feels dry, why temptation so easily overcomes them, why there is no power in their lives. Listen to me, if you do not pray, it is because you do not know Him. Because the man who truly knows God, who has seen even a glimpse of His holiness, who has tasted His goodness, who has felt the weight of His presence, such a man cannot live without prayer. He cannot go through a single day without running to the secret place, without crying out to the one who is his very life. Yet today, prayer has been reduced to a formality, a routine, a lifeless string of words recited before meals or muttered in half-consciousness before sleep. And this is why there is no power in the church. This is why so many sit in pews every Sunday, hearing sermons but never changing. It is why so many claim the name of Christ but live in defeat, bound by the same sins, enslaved to the same fears, tossed back and forth by the same trials, because there is no power apart from prayer. Some of you are sitting here right now, and deep down you know this is true. You know you have neglected the secret place. You know your prayers have become mechanical, empty, void of fire. You go through the motions of Christianity, but inside you feel dry, cold, powerless. And maybe, if you're honest, you would admit that you don't even desire to pray. Do you know why? Because the flesh hates prayer. Your flesh will let you read books about prayer, listen to sermons on prayer, discuss prayer with others, but the moment you try to actually pray, every distraction will come, every excuse will arise, and your flesh will fight with everything it has to keep you from doing it. Why? Because prayer is war. The enemy does not fear a man who merely goes to church. He does not tremble at a man who knows doctrine. But the man who prays, hell fears him. Because the one who prays does not rely on his own strength, but on the power of God. And Satan knows that when a man gets on his knees in true, desperate prayer, strongholds break, chains shatter, souls are set free. This is why the enemy will do everything he can to keep you from praying. He will fill your life with distractions, make you feel too tired, too busy, too discouraged. He will whisper lies in your ear, telling you that your prayers don't matter, that God isn't listening, that you aren't worthy to come before Him. And if you believe these lies, you will live in perpetual defeat, powerless, empty, distant from the very one who is your source of life. But listen to me. Prayer is not about how strong you are. It is not about how well you can put words together. It is not about how long you can stay on your knees. Prayer is about coming to God as you are, weak, broken, desperate, and throwing yourself at His feet, knowing that apart from Him you can do nothing. Nothing. Do you understand that? You cannot walk in holiness apart from prayer. You cannot love your spouse, raise your children, overcome temptation, or fulfill God's calling on your life apart from prayer. Because apart from Him, you have no strength, you have no wisdom, you have no power. But the one who abides in Him through prayer, the one who clings to Him in the secret place, Such a man will walk in a power that is not his own. Such a man will stand firm when the storms come, will overcome when trials arise, will bear fruit that lasts, because he is not relying on himself, but on the one who upholds the universe by the word of his power. Look at the great men and women of faith throughout history, men who shook nations, women who changed generations. They were not great because of their talent, their charisma, their intelligence. They were great because they knew how to get on their knees. They knew how to seek the face of God, how to cry out to him with a heart that would not let go. And because they prayed, the heavens opened, mountains moved, and the kingdom of darkness was pushed back. Where are such men today? Where are such women? Where are those who will shut themselves in their rooms, fall on their faces, and cry, "Lord, if you do not move, I am undone"? Where are those who will wrestle in prayer, not for their own comfort, not for their own prosperity, but for souls, for revival, for the kingdom of God to break forth in power? Or have we become so consumed with ourselves, so distracted by the world, that we have forgotten what it means to truly seek him? Oh, that God would awaken us again, that he would set a fire in our hearts, a hunger for the secret place, a desperation for his presence that cannot be quenched. That we would become men and women of prayer, not in word but in reality, not as a routine but as a way of life. Because if we will not pray, we will not see him move. If we will not seek him, we will remain powerless. But if we will return to the secret place, if we will once again fall on our knees and cry out to him with all that we are, then, and only then, will we see the doors of heaven swing wide open before us. And the question remains, will we? There are doors in life that no man can open. No strength of will, no human wisdom, no amount of effort can force them to move. They remain shut, sealed by something greater than us. And many people spend their entire lives trying to push through them in their own power. They strive, they labor, they build plans, make strategies, rely on their intellect, their money, their connections. But at the end of it all, the door remains closed because the door of heaven does not open to the self-sufficient. The problem today is that most people do not recognize their need. They believe they have enough strength on their own. They believe they have enough wisdom to navigate life. They believe their religious activity, their good works, their own morality is enough to make them acceptable before God. And so they live their lives in a state of quiet self-reliance, never truly desperate for God, never truly broken before him, never truly coming to the place where they cry, "Lord, if you do not move, I have nothing." And that is why the door remains shut. Do you understand? God resists the proud. He turns his face away from those who come to him in arrogance, in self-righteousness, in confidence in their own abilities. The man who stands before God and says, "Look at what I have done. Look at my efforts. Look at my achievements." That man will receive nothing because God will not share his glory. He will not give his strength to the one who still believes in his own. But to the broken, to the desperate, to the one who comes with nothing in his hands, nothing to offer, nothing to boast in but Christ alone, that is the man who will see the door open before him. Some of you are waiting on God to move, but you are still relying on yourself. You want him to act, but you are still trying to control the outcome. You want him to open the door, but you refuse to bend your knee. And until you come to the end of yourself, until you realize that you are not enough, you will remain outside. Because God will not compete with your pride. Look at the Pharisee in Scripture who stood in the temple, praying with his head held high, thanking God that he was not like other sinners. He listed his religious works, spoke of his fasting, his tithing, his righteousness, and yet the heavens were silent. His prayer did not reach God. His words, though eloquent, were meaningless because he believed he was sufficient. He believed his works were enough. But then, in the shadows, there was another man, a tax collector, a man despised, a man who had nothing to offer but a broken heart. He did not lift his head. He did not speak great words. He simply beat his chest and cried, "God, have mercy on me, a sinner." And Jesus said that man went home justified. Why? Because he knew that apart from God's mercy, he was lost. He knew that apart from grace, he had no hope. He knew that nothing in himself could open the door. And so in desperation, in humility, in absolute dependence, he cried out. And the door swung open. Do you understand? God is not moved by your strength. He is moved by your surrender. He does not respond to self-sufficiency. He responds to brokenness. The man who still believes he has something to offer will be sent away empty. But the one who comes with empty hands will be filled. Some of you have spent your entire lives trying to earn God's favor. You have labored under the weight of religion, convinced that if you just pray more, if you just read more, if you just try harder, then maybe God will accept you. And yet, no matter how much you do, it never feels like enough. You are exhausted, you are weary, you are burdened. Because you have not yet understood this truth, God's door does not open to effort. It opens to faith. It opens to those who stop striving and start surrendering. There are people in this room who are still standing outside because they refuse to let go. You refuse to lay down your pride. You refuse to confess your weakness. You refuse to admit that you need Him more than the air in your lungs. And until you come to that place, until you fall on your knees and say, Lord, I cannot do this without you, you will remain outside. Some of you are waiting for God to move, but He is waiting for you to kneel. This is why prayer is the key, not because prayer itself has power, but because true prayer is an act of surrender. It is the moment when a man stops relying on himself and throws himself completely on the mercy of God. It is the moment when he stops trying to open the door in his own strength and instead cries out to the one who holds the key. That is why the door remains shut for so many, because they have not yet learned what it means to truly pray. They pray with their lips, but their hearts are still self-sufficient. They speak words to God, but they still believe in their own ability to fix things, to make things happen, to control the outcome. And so their prayers are powerless. But when a man truly prays, when he lays down his pride, when he confesses his absolute dependence, when he cries out with everything in him, heaven moves. Because God is near to the brokenhearted. He gives grace to the humble. He lifts up the one who falls before Him. The question is, will you fall or will you keep standing? Will you keep pretending? Will you keep trying to push through the door in your own strength, or will you finally lay it all down and come to Him as you are, weak, broken, desperate? Because the door is not shut to those who knock. But the key is not strength. The key is surrender. And only those who bend their knee will see it open. Prayer is not about changing God's mind. It is not about persuading Him to do what we want. Prayer is about bringing ourselves to a place where our desires are swallowed up in His will. It is the process of surrender, where our hearts are aligned with His purpose, where our stubbornness is broken, and where we begin to see that He is enough. But most people do not pray this way. Most people come to God with their plans already made, their desires already settled, their minds already determined. They do not seek His will, they seek His approval. They do not come to be led, they come to be affirmed. They come to the throne of God like a man bringing a contract, asking Him to sign off on their own ambitions, their own solutions, their own ideas of what their life should be. And when He does not answer the way they want, when the door remains closed, they become angry. They say, why isn't God listening? Why isn't He responding? But listen, God is not a tool for your plans. He is not a means to an end. He is not obligated to bless your desires simply because you have attached a prayer to them. He is God, and He does not bow to your will. You bow to His. This is where so many struggle in prayer. They believe that if they pray hard enough, long enough, passionately enough, they can force God to act the way they want. But God is not moved by manipulation. He is not controlled by human persistence. And He will not answer a prayer that contradicts His perfect wisdom. Some of you have been praying for things, but God has not given them to you, and instead of seeking His heart, instead of asking Him to shape your desires, you have grown frustrated. You have accused Him of ignoring you, of withholding what you deserve, but have you ever considered that His silence is mercy? Have you ever considered that what you are asking for is not what you need, that the thing you are begging Him for might actually lead you away from Him rather than closer? God does not answer prayers according to our demands. He answers according to His will. And sometimes that means saying no. Sometimes that means shutting doors we wanted to walk through. Sometimes that means withholding what we thought would bring us happiness because He knows it would only bring destruction. Look at Christ in the garden, the Son of God, sweating drops of blood, face down in the dirt, crying out, Father, if it is possible, let this cup pass from me. Do you understand? He was in agony. He was staring at the full weight of sin, the wrath of God, the horror of the cross. And in His humanity, He asked if there was another way. But He did not stop there. He did not demand His way. He did not fight the will of God. He did not rebel against what was coming. No, He surrendered. Nevertheless, not my will, but yours be done. And with those words, the greatest prayer ever prayed was uttered. A prayer not of self-interest, but of submission. A prayer not of demand, but of surrender. A prayer that did not change God's will, but conformed the heart of the one praying to it. This is real prayer. Not a list of wants, not a spiritual wish list, not an attempt to twist God's arm. True prayer is when a man lays down his will at the feet of God and says, whatever you desire, that is what I want, even if it costs me, even if it hurts, even if it means losing everything. And that is why so few truly pray, because true prayer requires death. It requires the death of self, the death of pride, the death of personal ambition. It requires a willingness to be made nothing so that Christ may be everything. Some of you wonder why God has not moved in your life. You pray, but you do not yield. You cry out, but you do not surrender. You ask for His guidance, but in your heart you have already determined what you will do, and so your prayers are powerless. Because God does not answer the prayers of the self-willed. He answers the prayers of the broken, the yielded, the ones who have learned to say, not my will, but yours be done. Do you know why so many people are weak in their faith? It is because they have never learned to pray this way. They have never learned to submit. They have never come to the place where they say, Lord, even if you take everything, even if you lead me where I do not want to go, even if you answer in a way I do not understand, I will trust you. This is what separates true followers of Christ from those who only want the benefits of God without the cost. Because anyone can pray when they think they will get what they want. Anyone can ask for blessings. But the one who truly loves God is the one who will remain faithful even when the answer is no. The one who will still bow even when the way is hard. The one who will still worship even when the prayers are met with silence. Some of you have spent your whole lives asking God to do your will. But what if for once you asked Him to do His will in you? What if instead of bringing Him your own plans, you knelt before Him with empty hands and said, Lord, whatever you desire, that is what I want. Do you know what would happen? The door would open. Not necessarily to what you imagined, not necessarily to the thing you thought you wanted, but to something far greater, to a deeper walk with Him, to a faith refined by fire, to a life shaped by His sovereign hand. Because God is not interested in fulfilling your dreams. He is interested in making you like Christ. And if you will truly surrender in prayer, if you will truly bow before Him with no conditions, no demands, no resistance, then you will finally understand what it means to walk in His perfect will. And that is where true life begins. There is no such thing as a strong Christian who does not pray. There is no such thing as a victorious believer who does not seek the face of God. There is no such thing as a man or woman walking in the power of the Holy Spirit who is not continually on their knees, crying out for His presence, for His strength, for His guidance. And yet, this is where so many fail. They want power, but they do not pray. They want victory over sin, but they do not pray. They want to walk in holiness, to be used by God, to have wisdom in their decisions, but they do not pray. They read books about prayer, they listen to sermons about prayer, they talk about the importance of prayer, but they do not actually pray. And then they wonder why their spiritual lives feel dry. They wonder why they keep falling into the same sin. They wonder why they lack passion for God. Listen to me. There is no way around this. You cannot walk with God apart from prayer. You cannot be strong in faith if you are weak in prayer. You cannot overcome the flesh if you are not daily running to the secret place, shutting yourself in with God and crying out, Lord, I cannot do this without you. But this is where the deception comes in. Many people think that because they go to church, because they read the Bible, because they do Christian things, they will automatically have spiritual strength. But listen, reading the Word without prayer will only fill your mind with knowledge. Going to church without prayer will only give you the appearance of godliness. Doing ministry without prayer will only lead to burnout. Because spiritual power is not gained by human effort. It is gained by abiding in God. And a man who does not pray is not abiding. Jesus Himself, the Son of God, the one who was fully God and fully man, walked in constant prayer. He withdrew to desolate places. He rose before the sun to seek the Father. He prayed in the wilderness. He prayed before choosing His disciples. He prayed before going to the cross. Every major moment in His life was saturated in prayer. And yet here we are thinking we can live without it. If the sinless Son of God could not fulfill his mission apart from prayer, what makes us think we can? If he, in his perfect righteousness, needed to seek the Father continually, what makes us believe we can walk in holiness without doing the same? If he, in his infinite wisdom, still fell on his knees and cried out to God, why do we think we can figure things out on our own? The truth is, many do not pray because they have never truly understood their own weakness. They believe they are strong. They believe they have control. They believe they can overcome sin with enough willpower, that they can make wise choices without divine guidance, that they can live this Christian life in their own ability. And so they do not pray. And because they do not pray, they remain weak. They struggle with the same temptations, the same doubts, the same fears, because they are trying to fight spiritual battles with human weapons. But listen to me. Your willpower will not save you. Your discipline will not sustain you. Your self-control will not keep you from falling. If you are not praying, you are already on your way to failure. Some of you have been trying to conquer sin in your own strength, and you are exhausted. You keep fighting, but you keep falling. You keep making promises to do better, but you keep returning to the same habits. And you wonder why. It is because you have not learned that victory does not come from trying harder. It comes from abiding deeper. Holiness is not the result of human will, it is the result of divine life, and you cannot receive that life if you are not connected to the source. You cannot bear fruit if you are not abiding in the vine. You cannot be strong if you are not constantly running to the one who gives strength. This is why some of you feel so spiritually empty, because you are running on fumes. You are trying to live off past experiences with God rather than fresh encounters with Him. You are trying to survive on yesterday's prayers rather than daily communion with Him, and it is not enough. You wonder why your heart feels cold. You wonder why sin feels more appealing than righteousness. You wonder why you have no passion for God, why you struggle to read the Bible, why worship feels lifeless. And the reason is simple. You have neglected the secret place. There is no shortcut to spiritual strength. There is no other way to walk in power. If you do not pray, you will remain weak. If you do not seek Him, you will remain dry. If you do not abide in Him, you will be like a branch that is cut off, withering, lifeless, fruitless. But listen, there is hope, because the door is still open. God has not turned away from you. He is not standing far off, waiting for you to figure things out on your own. No, He is calling, He is drawing, He is inviting you to return. And if you will hear His voice today, if you will fall on your knees, if you will turn away from self-reliance, if you will humble yourself before Him and say, Lord, I cannot live without you, He will meet you, He will strengthen you, He will revive what has grown cold. The enemy does not fear a man who merely claims to be a Christian. He does not fear a man who goes to church, who sings worship songs, who listens to sermons. But the man who prays, that man is a threat to the kingdom of darkness. That man walks in power. That man carries the presence of God. Which one will you be? Will you continue in weakness, relying on yourself, walking through life spiritually dry, trying to overcome sin in your own strength? Or will you return to the secret place, to the one who alone is able to sustain you, to strengthen you, to fill you with power from on high? The choice is yours. But know this, those who walk with God are those who kneel before Him. And if you will not kneel, you will not stand. Many people claim to trust God, but their lives tell a different story. They say they believe in His power, but they do not rely on it. They say they have faith, but when trials come, their first instinct is not to fall on their knees. It is to panic, to strategize, to figure things out on their own. They talk about dependence on God, but when they are pressed, they reveal that their true dependence has always been on themselves. And this is why their lives are marked by anxiety rather than peace, by fear rather than confidence, by striving rather than resting in God's provision. Because trust is not what we say with our mouths, it is what we reveal in our actions. A man who truly trusts God is a man of prayer, because he understands that apart from God, he has no strength, no wisdom, no ability to navigate the trials of life. But a man who does not pray, that is a man who may claim to trust God, but in reality, he is still relying on himself. Some of you are facing struggles right now and you do not know what to do. You are weighed down by decisions, overwhelmed by circumstances, burdened by things you cannot control. And you have tried everything. You have sought advice. You have made plans. You have worked as hard as you can, but nothing is changing. Have you prayed? Have you truly laid it before the Lord? Not just a quick prayer in passing, not just a few words spoken out of obligation, but have you actually fallen before Him and said, God, I have nothing. I do not know what to do. I need you, because that is what real trust looks like. It is not just acknowledging God when it is convenient. It is running to Him first before anything else. It is depending on Him so completely that prayer is not your last resort. It is your first instinct. Some of you have been living under constant stress, constantly worried about how things will turn out, because you have not yet learned to rest in the one who holds all things in His hands. You are still trying to control what was never yours to control. You are still fighting battles that were never yours to fight. Listen, God does not need your help to accomplish His will. He does not need you to figure everything out. He does not need you to be strong enough or wise enough or capable enough. He only calls you to trust Him, to depend on Him, to cast all your cares upon Him because He cares for you. But that is the real question, isn't it? Do you trust Him? Do you truly believe that He is faithful? Because if you did, you would not be anxious about tomorrow. If you did, you would not live in constant fear. If you did, you would not keep trying to carry burdens that He has already promised to carry for you. Some of you say you trust God, but when He asks you to wait, you grow impatient. You say you trust Him, but when He does not answer in the way you expect, you doubt. You say you trust Him, but the moment suffering comes, you question His goodness. And what that reveals is that your faith was never really in Him. It was in your idea of how things should be. But trust does not demand explanations. Trust does not require that God do things according to our understanding. Trust bows before the sovereignty of God and says, Lord, even if I do not see, even if I do not understand, even if the road ahead is uncertain, I know you are faithful, and that is enough. This is why prayer is so essential, because prayer is not just asking God for things, it is an act of surrender. It is the place where we let go of our anxieties, our fears, our need for control, and we say, God, I place everything in your hands. It is where we exchange our weakness for His strength, our confusion for His wisdom, our burdens for His peace. But many do not pray like this. Many pray only when they want something from God, but they do not pray as an act of trust. They do not pray in a way that shows they believe He is truly in control. They pray with their lips, but in their hearts they are still trying to control everything themselves. This is why so many people are exhausted, because instead of trusting in God's power, they are relying on their own. Instead of resting in His promises, they are trying to secure their own future. Instead of walking in faith, they are consumed by worry. But listen, worry is a sign of misplaced trust. If you are constantly anxious, constantly fearful, constantly burdened, it is because your heart has not yet learned to rest in Him. Jesus said, do not be anxious about your life. Do you know why? Because He knows how weak we are. He knows how quick we are to doubt. He knows that the moment things start to fall apart, our first instinct is to worry, to try to fix things ourselves. But He says, seek first the kingdom of God, and all these things will be added to you. In other words, stop chasing after what the world chases after. Stop trying to secure your own future. Stop being consumed by the cares of this life. Seek Him, trust Him, walk with Him, and He will take care of the rest. Some of you have been carrying things that you were never meant to carry. You have been weighed down by burdens that God never asked you to bear. And it is time to let them go. It is time to surrender. It is time to stop living as though everything depends on you and start trusting the one who holds all things together. This is why prayer is the key to God's open door. Because when you pray, you are demonstrating faith. You are declaring, Lord, I trust you. I do not need to have all the answers. I do not need to know what tomorrow holds. I only need to know that you are faithful. And when you truly trust Him, when you stop striving and start surrendering, you will find peace. You will find rest. You will find that the very things you have been chasing after will be given to you in His perfect timing, in His perfect way. Because the door does not open to those who push in their own strength. It opens to those who knock in faith, in dependence, in absolute trust in the one who holds the key. Some of you have been standing before a door that God has not yet opened. You have prayed, you have waited, you have sought His will, and yet the door remains shut. And in your heart a battle is raging. Doubt begins to creep in. The enemy whispers, maybe God isn't listening. Maybe He doesn't care. Maybe you are wasting your time. But listen listen to me. The delay is not denial. The waiting is not rejection. The silence does not mean that God is absent. He is working even when you do not see it. He is shaping you even when it feels like nothing is happening. Because prayer is not just about receiving an answer. It is about transforming the one who prays. Some of you have been asking God for something, but you are not yet ready to receive it. And He, in His perfect wisdom, is not withholding it out of cruelty. He is preparing you so that when the door does open, you will be able to walk through it in obedience, in holiness, in surrender. Because, listen, when God opens a door, it is not for your comfort. It is not for your self-exaltation. It is not so that you can have the things of this world. When God opens a door, it is for His glory. It is for His purposes. And He will not open a door for a man whose heart is still full of pride, of selfish ambition, of worldly desires. This is why some of you are still waiting. You have asked God to move, but He is working on your heart before He moves in your circumstances. He is teaching you dependence. He is stripping away your self-reliance. He is breaking you of every idol, every false hope, every confidence you had apart from Him. Because when the door finally opens, He does not want you walking through it in your own strength. He wants you walking through it fully surrendered, fully trusting, fully yielded to Him. Some of you are frustrated with God because He is not answering the way you want. But have you asked yourself, do you truly want what He wants? Have you laid down every desire that is not from Him? Have you said, Lord, if you never give me what I am asking for, you are still enough? Because this is what true prayer produces. It does not just change circumstances, it changes hearts. It molds a man into someone who no longer prays, God, give me what I want, but instead prays, God, give me what you want. And that is when the door opens. That is when the delay turns into direction. That is when God's perfect timing is revealed. Not because you forced your way in, not because you prayed harder than anyone else, but because you were finally in a place where His will was more important than your own. But this is why so many grow weary in prayer. They want the answer more than they want Him. They want the blessing, but they do not want to be broken. They want the door to open, but they are not willing to wait until their heart is in the right place. And so they turn away. They stop seeking. They stop believing. They stop trusting that God is good. But listen, God does not operate on your timeline. He is not bound by your expectations. And when He makes you wait, it is never wasted time. He is doing something in the waiting. He is refining you. He is testing your faith. He is seeing whether you truly love Him or whether you only love what He can give you. Some of you have been praying for years and you are on the verge of giving up. You are tired. You are worn. You have cried out again and again and still nothing has changed. And the temptation is to say, what's the point? But listen, every prayer you have prayed has been heard. Every tear you have shed has been seen. Every moment of waiting has been part of His plan, and He is not finished. The enemy wants you to stop praying. He wants you to walk away before the breakthrough comes. He wants you to believe the lie that God is not faithful, but do not let go. Do not grow weary. Do not allow the delay to turn into doubt. Keep praying, keep seeking, keep knocking, because the God who called you to pray is the God who will answer in His perfect time. And when He does, you will see. You will see that every moment of waiting had a purpose. You will see that every tear, every struggle, every unanswered prayer was shaping you into the person He needed you to be. You will see that He was never late, never absent, never silent. He was working all along. Because God's doors do not open by accident. They do not open by human striving. They open by His hand, in His time, for His glory. And when they do, no power in hell can shut them. No man can stop them. No force on earth can stand against what He has ordained. So keep praying, keep trusting, keep waiting, because when the door opens, you will know it was worth it.